Carter Braxton was a signer of the United States Declaration of Independence, as well as a merchant, planter, and Virginia politician. A grandson of Robert King Carter, one of the wealthiest and most powerful landowners and slaveholders in the Old Dominion, Carter Braxton was active in Virginia's legislature for more than 25 years, generally allied with Landon Carter, Benjamin Harrison, Edmund Pendleton and other conservative slaveholders. Early life. Carter Braxton was born on Newington Plantation in King and Queen County, Virginia on September 16, 1736, but wrongly reported as dead along with his mother, Mary Carter Braxton, who, unhappily catching cold, died shortly after his birth. His maternal grandfather, King Carter, possibly the wealthiest man as well as the largest landowner in Virginia at the time of his death, had bequeathed 2,000 liras to his youngest daughter, who became betrothed to George Braxton, Jr., 5 months after her father's death. His paternal grandfather, George Braxton, Sr., by 1704 had also become one of the 100 largest landowners in Virginia's northern neck. George Braxton Sr. had been elected for the first time to the House of Burgesses in 1718, and was re-elected 9 years later with John Robinson, Jr., who would become the powerful Speaker of the House of Burgesses and benefactor of the Braxton family. The elder Braxton owned at least one ship, the Braxton, that traded with the West Indies and elsewhere, and was commission agent for cargoes of enslaved blacks sold to Virginia planters. He died, age 71, when Carter was 12. His eldest son, George Jr., had succeeded him as delegate for King and Queen County in 1742, but himself died not long thereafter. Speaker Robinson and neighbor Humphrey Hill served as guardians for Carter and his slightly elder brother George. Educated at the College of William and Mary like his father and brother, Braxton followed family tradition at age 19 by marrying Judith Robinson, a wealthy heiress and the Speaker's niece. However, she died 2 years later, leaving Braxton 2 daughters, Mary and Judith. The young widower soon journeyed to England for 2 years. Upon returning to the colonies in 1760, Braxton sold Elsing Green, where he had lived with Judith, and married again, this time to Elizabeth Corbin, eldest daughter of Richard Corbin, Deputy Receiver General for His Majesty's Revenues in Virginia, who brought her 1,000 liras dowry. Career as merchant and plantation owner. Carter Braxton purchased a small schooner shortly after his second marriage, and turned his energies to trade. Braxton traded between the West Indies and American colonies, establishing relationships with Bayard Son of New York and William Morris of Philadelphia. He also urged the Brown brothers of Providence, Rhode Island, who had abandoned the slave trade during the French and Indian War, to sell him African people, but such transactions may not have completed. Whether or not Braxton's mercantile enterprises included slave trading, he and his brother were accompanied by a black slave at the College of William and Mary. Braxton later owned many more slaves on his various plantations, and there are no records of manumissions or a will. His biographer notes that at the end of the Revolutionary War, 6 years later, despite the financial problems discussed below, Braxton still owned 8,500 acres, which still made him one of the 100 largest landowners in the new state. The biographer, Alonzo T. Dill, also states that, before his death, Braxton sold off or gave to his kinsmen all but 42 of his blacks and probably could only have farmed fewer than half of the remaining 3,900 acres. Braxton's racial attitudes, while common to his class, contrasted with those of another of King Carter's grandsons, Robert Carter III, and of George Mason IV, who fought against the slave trade during their legislative careers. Most persons with the name Carter Braxton since the end of the Civil War have been, and are, African American, presumably descendants of slaves on Braxton's plantation. Early political career. Braxton began his long career representing King William County in the Virginia House of Burgesses, taking his seat in 1761. However, his brother George died on October 3 of that year, leaving an insolvent estate, so the family lost Newington. Although both high-living Braxtons had been considered wealthy, as well as political allies of Speaker John Robinson, when the John Robinson estate scandal broke in 1766, they turned out to be among the largest beneficiaries of the late Speaker's interest-free loans of redeemed paper money supposed to have been burned. In addition to his duties as a burgess, Braxton served as sheriff of King William County, colonel of its militia, and vestryman of the troubled St. John's Church about 10 miles east of his Jericho plantation. Factional disputes within the parish grew so severe that the House of Burgesses held hearings and ultimately passed a special bill dissolving the vestry, as Braxton had wished. Although always considered a moderate or conservative politician, Braxton signed the first Virginia Association intended to protest the townshend duties on tea and other products, but like his ally Landon Carter, not the second association which set up boycott compliance mechanism, nor the third Virginia Association pledging not to purchase various East Indian commodities. However, in 1774 Braxton returned to Williamsburg as King William County's delegate, and joined 108 others in the Fourth Virginia Association, which authorized local committees of safety as well as volunteer militia. When Lord Dunmore seized the colony's gunpowder and flintlocks for their rifles, Braxton helped negotiate a compromise between fellow legislator Patrick Henry and his own father-in-law Corbin that averted a crisis. Reluctant revolutionary and Virginia conservative, Braxton was a moderate politician during the Revolution, often viewed as sympathetic to the British, although absent at some sessions. He had represented his county 16 times between 1761 and Lord Dunmore's dissolution of the House of Burgesses. Braxton also served as the county delegate to all 5 sessions of the Virginia Convention. In 1774, Braxton joined the Patriots Committee of Safety in Virginia, as well as chaired the Legislative Committee considering legal penalties for Tories. When Peyton Randolph died unexpectedly in Philadelphia in October 1775, fellow Virginia legislators elected Braxton to take his place in the Continental Congress. He served in the Congress from February 1776 until August, when Virginia reduced its delegation to 5 members. In that capacity Braxton signed the Declaration of Independence, although he had previously opposed it as premature in Committee of the Whole, and explained his stance in several letters to his uncle Landon Carter. Braxton also drew revolutionaries' criticism for his pamphlet, addressed to the convention, which he had printed in reply to the proposals of John Adams's Thoughts on Government. Afterwards Braxton returned to the House of Burgesses, which thanked him and Thomas Jefferson for their service. Although King William voters failed to re-elect the absent Braxton as one of their delegates. Moreover, his house at Jericho burned down shortly before Christmas, 1776, so Braxton moved his family to Grove House near West Point, Virginia. Through most of his legislative career, Braxton was a political opponent of the Lee family, and he also became involved in a press quarrel with anti-slavery activist and diplomat Arthur Lee, supposedly concerning Silas Deane's mercantile and diplomatic activities. Between 1776 and 1785, Braxton served in 8 of the 11 legislative assemblies, and attended 14 of 21 sessions, with a special concern for debt and tax moratoriums or other relief, financial speculation and troubles. Braxton invested a great deal of his wealth in the American Revolution. Like Robert Morris, Braxton loaned money to the cause, as well as funded shipping and privateering. Braxton sold Virginia and Carolina tobacco and corned meat abroad, and secured arms and ammunition, as well as wheat and salt, and cloth and other trade goods. In 1780, the Continental Congress censured Braxton for his role in the Phoenix Affair of 1777, in which his privateer seized a neutral Portuguese vessel from Brazil, prompting diplomatic protests. The British also destroyed some of Braxton's plantations during the war, in addition to the indebtedness incurred after the deaths of his father and brother, and through his own relatively poor agricultural business practices. Braxton accumulated war debts of the Continental Congress and also of Robert Morris, both of which proved slow to repay. In 1786, Braxton sold a plantation and rented a smaller residence in Richmond, which allowed him to repay his own indebtedness to the Robinson estate in 1787. Braxton also sued Robert Morris in Henrico County Court for 28,257 liras in that year, but the lawsuit continued for 8 years before commissioners were appointed, then Morris appealed. Finally, Virginia's Court of Appeals, led by Edmund Pendleton, decided mostly in favor of Braxton before Morris was forced into bankruptcy by his own continued land speculations. In 1791, Braxton also purchased Strawberry Hill outside Richmond for his wife, and conveyed it to his sons Carter Jr. and Corbin to hold for their mother's benefit. Braxton's biographer does not believe that Braxton hid assets from his creditors by placing them in relatives' names, although his widow later attempted to recover der rights in land and slaves that her husband sold in his last years. His sons-in-law, Robert Page and John White, paid creditors more than 2,000 liras on Braxton's behalf. On November 15, 1785, fellow delegates elected Braxton to the Council of State, receiving the paid position vacated by William Nelson, Jr. Braxton moved to Richmond, which had become the capital in 1780. Ineligible for re-election for 3 years, Braxton was elected a second time in 1794. Braxton died, aged 61, in his Richmond home on October 10, 1797. Family tradition maintains Henrico County Sheriff Samuel Mosby was at Braxton's door attempting to collect debts lest he have to pay them himself. Legacy. A biographer speculated that Braxton may be the founding father with the most descendants, since he and his second wife may have had as many as 16 children, in addition to his 2 daughters with his first wife. Although none of Braxton's sons lived as long as their father, they and their sisters had numerous children, many of whom fought in the Confederate Army during the American Civil War, including grandsons Carter Moore Braxton of the Fredericksburg Artillery, Tomlinson Braxton, M.D., and Elliott Muse Braxton. Confederate General Braxton Bragg was named for the signer, but not apparently a descendant. Another great-grandson, John W. Stevenson of Kentucky, served 2 terms as U.S. Representative before the Civil War, and later won election as governor in 1868 and U.S. Senator in 1871, before retiring to his law practice and becoming president of the American Bar Association. Virginia lawyer Allen Caperton Braxton, who led efforts to limit blacks' access to education and voting, particularly during Virginia's Constitutional Convention in 1902, proclaimed his descent from Carter Braxton. Kate Horsley, writer of historical novels, is a noteworthy contemporary descendant. Carter Braxton may have been buried at Jericho, which remains in the family's possession today. Although it burned in 1776, Braxton rebuilt it and gave to his eldest son George on his marriage to Mary Walker Carter in 1781. However, when the family graves there were moved to Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Indiana in 1910, his could not be located. A monument was erected for him nonetheless. Nearby Elsing Green also survives and is available for tourism. Braxton County, West Virginia was formed in 1836 and named in Braxton's honor. For a brief time during the 1960s to the early 1980s, the Waterman Steamship Company owned a breakbulk freighter, the SS Carter Braxton, which was named in his honor. The Newington archaeological site was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2010.